I found her in bed with another man, but that wasn't the worst part. I had been married to Vanessa for 5 years. 5 years of shared dreams, whispered promises, and moments of bliss. Or so I thought. But when I opened that door to our bedroom that night, my entire world shattered. There she was, Vanessa, the woman I'd sworn to love and protect, lying under the sheets with someone else. He was unfamiliar, his face half hidden beneath the covers, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that Vanessa wasn't just cheating on me. She had been playing me for years, weaving a web of lies so deep, I had no idea where the truth ended and the deceit began. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of it. The betrayal wasn't a shock. No, it was the realization that I had been living in a prison of illusion. Every kiss, every laugh, every "I love you" had been a performance, one that I'd fallen for without question. The years I had spent believing in her were now nothing but a cruel joke. And I was the punchline. But the worst part wasn't just the infidelity. It was the cold, indifferent look in her eyes when she caught sight of me. No guilt, no regret, no apology. Just a glance that said it all, I was nothing to her anymore. I didn't know what to do. My body felt frozen, my mind reeling with a mix of rage, confusion, and a deep, aching sense of loss. It was as if the foundation of my entire life had just crumbled beneath me. How could I have been so blind? With a shaky hand, I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in my chest as I stepped back into the stormy night. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for certain, I was done. And this was just the beginning. Vanessa and I met in college, a serendipitous encounter that felt like fate. I was an ambitious, slightly naive engineering student, focused on my studies and future career. She was a creative soul, an artist with a passion for photography and an infectious smile that could light up any room. From the moment our eyes met across a crowded campus quad, I felt an inexplicable pull. It was as though the universe had orchestrated this moment, and I had no choice but to follow the current. We fell in love quickly, at least, I thought we did. She was everything I wasn't. She was carefree, spontaneous, and always seemed to be looking for something beyond the surface. I was grounded in logic and reason, constantly planning ahead. Together, we seemed to balance each other out. Her wild imagination and my methodical approach created a perfect, harmonious blend. At least, that's how it seemed. But from the very beginning, I should have known something was off. I should have seen the cracks in our foundation. Vanessa was always a little distant when it came to her past, her family was a topic we rarely discussed. She had a way of deflecting questions, always brushing off anything too personal with a laugh or a change of subject. I never thought much of it. After all, we were young, we were in love, and we had time. Time to grow, to explore, and to build a life together. As the years passed, we moved in together after graduation, and soon after, we were engaged. I was convinced that I knew everything about her, the way she laughed when she was nervous, the way she bit her lip when she was lost in thought. I thought I knew her. But now, I realized that I never really knew her at all. Looking back, there were small signs, of course. There was the way she would disappear for hours at a time, claiming to be working on a project for her photography studio. There were late nights when she was catching up with friends, but I'd never met those friends. And there was always that vague unease in the pit of my stomach that I brushed aside, thinking I was just being paranoid. I didn't want to admit it, but deep down, I always felt like I wasn't enough for her. She had this hunger for something more. Something I couldn't give her. I loved her fiercely, but there was always this gap between us that I couldn't bridge. I spent years convincing myself that it was just a phase, that we'd find our way back to each other. But every time I reached out, she pulled away a little more. When we finally married, I thought that would seal the deal. I was wrong. The first year was bliss, or at least it seemed that way. We bought a house, started planning our future. But slowly, I began to feel her slip away again. She was still the woman I'd married, but there were moments when her eyes seemed to wander, when she was distracted, distant. It was like I could see her, but I couldn't reach her. She was always just out of reach. Still, I tried. I planned vacations, I made thoughtful gestures, I poured my energy into our relationship. I convinced myself that everything would get better, that we were just going through a rough patch. But the truth was, I wasn't the one she needed anymore. It wasn't about me or our love, it was about what she was seeking outside of our marriage. What I didn't know was that I wasn't the only one trying to fill the emptiness she had. Then came the night that shattered everything. That night, when I caught her in bed with another man, my mind raced back to everything I thought I knew. The clues, the hints, the moments of doubt, they all rushed back like a flood. It wasn't just the affair that crushed me, but the realization that she had been lying to me for so long. I had been nothing but a pawn in her game. But I wasn't entirely blameless either. My career had taken off in ways I hadn't anticipated, and in my pursuit of success, I had neglected her. I was so wrapped up in my own ambitions that I didn't notice how much she had started to withdraw. I hadn't seen the signs because I had been too busy looking at my own reflection in the mirror of achievement. I had put her on a pedestal and convinced myself that she would always be there, always be the woman I married. But the truth was, she was always searching for something else, something I couldn't give her. And I had been too blind to see it. There were so many layers to Vanessa, so many sides of her that I never truly understood. I had thought I knew her better than anyone, but in the end, I had never even scratched the surface. The woman I thought I had built a life with was someone entirely different. And as I stood there, drenched and heartbroken in the rain, I realized that this was only the beginning of my reckoning. I would never go back to the man I was before. The betrayal had ignited something in me, something I couldn't ignore. I was no longer just a victim. I was something else now. And whatever came next, I would be ready. The door slammed shut behind me, the sound of it reverberating through the hollow silence of the night. The rain didn't let up. It was as though the heavens themselves were mourning my loss, pouring down in torrents, drowning everything in sight. But even the downpour couldn't wash away the realization that had settled deep within my bones. I had just seen her, Vanessa, with him. I had seen them together, and yet, in my shock, I didn't leave right away. No, I stood there for a moment, frozen. Part of me was still in denial, clinging to the hope that there was some rational explanation for what I'd just witnessed. Maybe they were just friends, maybe there was something I misunderstood. But deep down, I knew that was a lie I had been telling myself for years. It wasn't until the following morning, when I returned to the house, that the truth came crashing down with the weight of 1,000 bricks. Vanessa had gone. The bed was empty, her side of it cold. I had expected her to be there, to apologize, to explain herself, but she was gone. The space between us had never felt more suffocating. There was no note, no message, no sign that she even cared enough to face me. It was as if the woman I had known was already gone. Disappeared into the ether like she never existed. But there was one thing left behind, her phone, sitting carelessly on the kitchen counter. I knew I shouldn't have touched it, but I did. I don't even know why I picked it up, why I felt compelled to go through her messages, her calls, her life. Maybe it was the need for closure. Maybe it was the desperate hope that there was an explanation. But I wasn't prepared for what I found. The first message hit me like a punch to the gut: meet me tonight. I can't stop thinking about you. I need you. D. 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 His name kept echoing in my mind like an alarm, and I felt my blood go cold. It couldn't be, it just couldn't be. D was Daniel, her best friend. I had known him for years. He was the one I'd always trusted, the one I had laughed with, the one I had welcomed into our home like family. The one who had always praised our relationship, our commitment. How could it be him? But it wasn't just one message. There were dozens of them, strewn across the screen in a twisted, digital confessional. I love the way you kiss me. It feels like you're mine, even when you're not with me. We can't keep pretending. I want you, Vanessa. Only you. My hands shook as I scrolled through the conversations, each word a fresh wound opening on my chest. How could I have been so blind? How could I have not seen the subtle changes in their behavior? The way they exchanged knowing glances at parties, the moments of lingering touch I had brushed off as nothing. They had been laughing behind my back, living a double life right under my nose. The betrayal was far deeper than I had imagined. As I read on, my heart pounded, each new message unraveling more of the tangled web they had spun. The truth wasn't just about infidelity, it was about manipulation, deceit, and the slow erosion of everything I had trusted. They had been planning this. It wasn't just a mistake, a momentary lapse. No, they had been seeing each other in secret for months, perhaps even longer. And I had been the fool who never saw it coming. But there was more. The last message stopped me cold. I'm leaving him. He'll never know. We'll be together, Daniel. Just us. Vanessa had been planning her escape, and I was the one she was escaping from. I was nothing but an obstacle in her eyes. She had already made her decision. And Daniel, the man I had called my friend, had been playing me all along. They had been working together to tear my world apart. But what struck me most was the coldness of it all. There was no guilt in her messages, no remorse. She was calm, as if she was already long gone emotionally, already preparing to step into a future that had no place for me. I stood there in the kitchen, the phone still in my trembling hands, and something shifted inside me. The devastation was sharp, but it was accompanied by an overwhelming rush of anger. This wasn't just a betrayal of my marriage. This was a betrayal of everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. I should have confronted her right then and there, but I couldn't bring myself to. The words caught in my throat, a mixture of disbelief and fury. But deep down, I knew I couldn't let her off so easily. She wasn't going to walk away without consequences. Neither was Daniel. They had both made their choices, and now, it was my turn to make mine. But before I could act, my phone buzzed. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. It was her, Vanessa. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. What could she possibly say to explain this? What excuse could she offer to justify everything? My mind raced with possibilities, but none of them mattered anymore. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with my heart, was gone. And the man who had been my friend, who had shared my laughter and my secrets, was just as much of a stranger now. I hit ignore and walked away, feeling the weight of the betrayal bearing down on me with every step. I had been hurt, humiliated, and deceived. But this was far from over. This was just the beginning. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and anger. Vanessa's phone continued to buzz with messages, but I ignored every call, every text. I needed space to think, to breathe, to process the whirlwind of emotions that seemed to have hijacked my life. But the truth, the devastating truth, was that there was no escaping it. She had betrayed me. But it wasn't just her. It was everyone. And that's when things took a turn I hadn't expected, when I realized that the betrayal I had suffered was only the tip of the iceberg. It started with Daniel. The man who had been my friend, the one I had trusted with my most vulnerable thoughts, didn't just stand by and watch his affair unfold. No, he was a mastermind of manipulation in his own right. It was during a late-night drink with some old colleagues, men I had once considered my close friends, that I heard it. "You know Daniel's been on edge lately," Greg, one of my old college roommates, said, his voice low as he leaned across the bar. "Word on the street is, he's been seeing someone, and it's not his wife." I froze, the glass in my hand suddenly feeling like a foreign object. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. But when I looked into Greg's eyes, I could see the flicker of something I didn't want to acknowledge. "Who?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Greg's eyes darted around nervously. He leaned in closer, his breath tinged with the stale taste of alcohol. "Vanessa," he said, his words like a punch to the gut. "I'm not the only one who knows. Hell, I thought you knew. It's been going on for months." The air around me grew thick. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't deny it anymore. Daniel and Vanessa's affair wasn't some fleeting mistake, it was planned, calculated. But there was something darker underneath it all. My best friend, the man who had been by my side through thick and thin, had been playing me from the start. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered trust. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came when Greg's words lingered in my mind, when he casually mentioned something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "There's something else I heard," Greg said, his voice dropping lower, the flicker of guilt crossing his face. "They've been planning something big. Daniel and Vanessa, I mean. They've been talking about a new life together, and from what I've heard, they're not just breaking up your marriage. They're taking everything." My stomach twisted, the words sinking into my gut like stones. Taking everything? What did that mean? What more could they possibly want from me? "I don't know the details, man," Greg continued, sipping his drink, clearly uncomfortable. "But they've been talking about business deals, investments. Something about your company, I don't know. But it's big." I felt my blood run cold. The last thing I needed was to think that they were plotting something with the one thing I had left, my career. I had worked tirelessly to build my business from the ground up. It wasn't just a job for me, it was my life. And now, it seemed like Vanessa and Daniel weren't just targeting my heart, they were coming after my livelihood as well. A dozen possibilities ran through my mind as I sat there in stunned silence. Were they using their affair to get ahead? Were they scheming to take over my company, to rob me of everything I had built? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that nothing about this situation was as simple as it seemed. I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing, I couldn't let them win. The next day, I decided to confront Daniel. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I found him at a bar, nursing a drink alone in a corner booth. He looked up as I approached, his expression one of feigned surprise. But I saw the flicker of something else in his eyes, guilt, maybe, or perhaps fear. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice calm but strained. He hesitated, then nodded, setting his drink aside as I slid into the booth across from him. The tension between us was palpable, a thick wall that neither of us seemed eager to breach. "I know about you and Vanessa," I said, my words as cold as the ice in my glass. "And I know about the plans you've been making. The business deals, the investments, what's your game, Daniel?" For the first time, his mask of indifference cracked. His eyes darted around the room, as though searching for an escape. But there was no escape. I had him cornered, and now he knew it. "What the hell are you talking about?" he replied, his voice strained, but there was a flicker of panic in his gaze. "You're just angry, man. You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I shot back. "I know about the affair. I know you've been plotting behind my back for months. But don't think for a second that I'm just going to let you take what's mine. My company. My life. You're not walking away from this unscathed." Daniel leaned back, a smug smile creeping across his face as he folded his arms. "You're making a big mistake, my friend. You've lost. Vanessa wants me, and she'll get me. As for your company, well, you've been too busy to notice how things have been slipping, haven't you? You think I haven't seen the cracks in your business? The poor decisions, the missed opportunities. You've been too distracted to see it, but I've been there. And now I'm taking it all." I felt my anger flare, but I held it in check. If he wanted a war, then he would get one. But this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about protecting everything I had worked for. I'm not going down without a fight, I said, my voice low and dangerous. And neither are you. He gave me a smug look before standing, tossing a few bills on the table. We'll see about that. And with that, he left, leaving me alone in the booth, seething with a fury I couldn't quite control. As I sat there, the weight of his words sank in. They weren't just out to ruin me emotionally, they were out to take everything from me. But I couldn't just roll over. No, this was only getting started. I would fight back. I would reclaim what was mine. And as I left the bar, a dark realization settled over me: Daniel wasn't just Vanessa's lover. He was her partner in crime. Together, they were going to tear apart everything I held dear. And now, it was my turn to destroy them. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces of this twisted puzzle fell into place. Daniel and Vanessa had been playing their game, a game they thought they had already won. But what they didn't realize was that I was no longer the naive man they had betrayed. The man they knew had died that night in the rain. The man who stood before them now was someone else entirely, a man whose heart had been broken and whose trust had been shattered, yes, but a man who had learned from his pain. And now, they were going to learn a lesson they would never forget. I knew that revenge couldn't be rash, couldn't be fueled purely by anger or the need for justice. It had to be calculated, measured, and precise. I needed to hit them where it hurt most, and that meant not just their relationship with each other, but their ambition, their egos, their greed. It began with my business. Vanessa and Daniel thought they could take it from me, they thought I was too distracted, too broken to notice the cracks. But they underestimated me. They had no idea how well I knew the inner workings of the company, how intimately I understood the deals that were in the pipeline, the financial statements, the connections I had built over the years. They thought they could swoop in and take it all. But what they didn't know was that I had already planted the seeds of their downfall. The first move was simple: I contacted my most trusted employees, the ones who had stood by me when times were tough, the ones who were loyal to the company. I briefed them on everything, on the fact that Vanessa and Daniel were attempting to sabotage the business. It was important that they understood what was at stake, not just for me, but for all of us. Together, we began to prepare for the worst. The second step was to secure the financial future of the company. I had recently been working on a major deal, one that could elevate the business to a level none of us had imagined. But I also knew that if Daniel got his hands on it, he would take it for himself, leaving me with nothing. So, I quietly reached out to investors, to key players, and made sure that the deal was sealed with me at the helm. No one could touch it now. I was already one step ahead of them. But the real game changer came when I set my sights on Vanessa. I knew her weaknesses, the things that motivated her, the things she desired most. I had once been the man who could read her every move, understand every look. And I was going to use that to my advantage. I started with small gestures, things that would seem insignificant on the surface. I sent her messages, cryptic ones, that hinted at things she would never expect. I used our old inside jokes, the things that no one else knew about her, the intimate details of our life together that had once been shared in the quiet hours of the night. But I didn't send these messages directly from me. I used anonymous accounts, contacts from the past, even people she wouldn't recognize. I wanted to create doubt in her mind, make her question whether she could trust Daniel completely. It worked. Vanessa began to unravel. She started to doubt everything. Her relationship with Daniel, her confidence in her own decisions, even her sense of security in the world she had carefully constructed. I watched from the shadows as her life began to fall apart in slow motion. Her messages to Daniel became more frantic, more urgent, as she wondered who was behind these messages. It wasn't long before she reached out to me, desperate for answers. But I didn't give her anything. I let her stew in her own paranoia. And then, came the final piece of the plan. This was the part that would hurt them both the most. It was time for the public reckoning. I knew exactly where to hit them. I had carefully crafted a plan that would expose their affair to everyone, their friends, their family, their colleagues. It wasn't just about personal betrayal anymore, it was about stripping away the facade they had built, forcing them to face the truth in front of the people who mattered most. I invited Daniel to a business meeting, a supposed opportunity to discuss some of the plans he had been scheming behind my back. But when he arrived, he was met not just with me, but with a dozen people, key players in my company, some of the investors, and, to my delight, Vanessa. I made sure that everything was in place, the cameras rolling, the evidence ready to be exposed. The moment he walked in, I didn't give him a chance to speak. I had already prepared the scene, a slideshow of their messages, their secret communications, the financial transactions they had been orchestrating. I stood up, calm but unyielding, and began reading the messages aloud, one by one. Vanessa's face turned pale, her eyes wide with panic. She tried to interrupt, to make excuses, but the evidence was irrefutable. Daniel stood there, his face draining of color, unable to speak. "You both thought you could take everything from me," I said, my voice steady, almost cold. "But what you didn't realize was that while you were plotting your betrayal, I was plotting my revenge. And now, everyone knows the truth. Your lies have caught up with you." The room was silent, save for the soft clicking of the projector as it displayed the final images, a graphic detailing the financial corruption they had planned to execute, the ways they had tried to manipulate the system to their advantage. It wasn't just their affair that was being exposed. It was their greed, their dishonesty, their complete disregard for the people they had pretended to care about. And then, I delivered the final blow. "I'm going to make sure you both lose everything," I said, looking at Daniel and Vanessa. "This company, your reputation, your so-called future together, it's all going to crumble. You don't get to walk away from this unscathed. You don't get to destroy my life and move on like nothing happened." Vanessa tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Daniel looked defeated, his arrogance replaced by terror. The truth was out, and they both knew it. The aftermath was swift. I made sure that Daniel's financial dealings were scrutinized, that Vanessa's name was removed from all business ventures related to my company. The investors saw what had happened, and many of them pulled their support from their joint ventures. The public exposure of their betrayal destroyed not only their personal relationship but also their professional aspirations. For Vanessa, the fallout was even more devastating. Her reputation, once pristine, was tarnished beyond repair. The life she had been building with Daniel, the one she thought would replace me, was nothing but a house of cards, now scattered in the wind. And in the end, she was left with nothing. As for me, I stood there, watching them as they crumbled, and a sense of bittersweet satisfaction washed over me. The man who had been broken, humiliated, and betrayed had risen from the ashes, stronger, sharper, and more determined than ever. I had reclaimed what was mine, not just in terms of my business, but in my own sense of self-worth. But the revenge didn't just give me closure. It gave me freedom. Freedom from the chains they had tried to bind me with. And as I walked away from the wreckage, a quiet voice inside me whispered that this was just the beginning. There would be more battles ahead, more betrayals to uncover, more games to play. But for now, I had won. And I would savor every moment of it. The storm had passed. The chaos, the heartbreak, the uncertainty that had once defined my life, it was all behind me now. But as I stood there, watching the fallout from my actions ripple through every corner of my world, a strange calm washed over me. Revenge wasn't about basking in the suffering of others. It wasn't about finding joy in their downfall. No, for me, it was about reclaiming control, about taking back what had been stolen from me. And that's exactly what I had done. Daniel and Vanessa had been humiliated, stripped of everything they thought they had, their careers, their reputations, their future together. The love they had so confidently paraded before me was nothing more than a house of lies, now crumbled to dust. It was almost poetic how quickly their empire of deceit had unraveled, how swiftly the world had turned on them. But the truth had always had a way of doing that. For me, though, there was no satisfaction in their misery. The revenge wasn't about seeing them pay for what they'd done. It was about me walking away with my dignity intact, knowing that I was no longer a victim. I had no desire to watch them suffer, the real victory was that they had been exposed. And in the end, they'd be the ones haunted by the consequences of their actions, not me. I had won. I had reclaimed my life, my business, and most importantly, my sense of self. But this victory was bittersweet. I had lost something along the way, something irreplaceable. Trust. Innocence. Faith in love. It was a hard lesson to learn, but one that I would never forget. Now, I could only move forward, scarred but stronger, wiser from the wounds that had been inflicted on me. The business began to flourish once again. The deals that had once been jeopardized by Vanessa and Daniel's treachery were secured. The company grew, but in a way that felt different, more calculated, more guarded. My team had rallied behind me, and we were building something even stronger than before. But in the back of my mind, I knew that this was just one chapter. One battle in a war that would never truly end. For now, though, I had the peace I had fought so hard for. But as I moved forward, I began to notice something. A subtle shift. A feeling that the story wasn't over. There were whispers in the business world, rumors of a new player emerging, someone with ties to both Vanessa and Daniel, someone with the power to make things even more complicated than they already were. I wasn't sure what their angle was, but I could feel the tension building again. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than I had realized. More secrets to uncover. More betrayal lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. I had already faced the worst of it, but I knew deep down that the storm was never truly over. The question wasn't whether I'd be betrayed again, it was who would do it next. And when. As I stood on the balcony of my office, overlooking the city that I had fought so hard to keep, I made a vow to myself, I would be ready. No one would ever pull me under again. I had learned too much, suffered too much, and now, I was a force to be reckoned with. The next time betrayal came for me, it would meet a man who was no longer a victim. But there were always more stories to tell. The betrayals never stopped. In fact, as I glanced back down at the city, I saw something that I hadn't seen before. Shadows. People I knew, people I trusted, moving in the periphery of my life, just out of sight. It wasn't just Daniel and Vanessa. There were other players, other stories, stories of revenge yet to unfold. And when the time came, when the next betrayal came knocking, I would be ready. But for now, I had my peace. My vengeance. My freedom. If you think this is the end, think again. The world of betrayal, revenge, and redemption is far from over. If you enjoyed this story, you won't want to miss what happens next. Who else is hiding in the shadows? Who will strike next, and how will our hero face the next wave of deceit? Stay tuned for more, because betrayal never truly ends. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be notified about the next chapter of this saga.